Been to California, seen the sights and people there.
Hi, I'm Michael.
And I'm Grace.
And we're California Travel Videos. And here we are at Lincoln, Massachusetts, not too far from Boston. And what's up here?
We are at the Minuteman, learning about the Revolution in 1775 and 1776.
What happened in 1775? That's right.
The
British were
around
on
the world.
one side of the bridge, and I'd like to say the Americans, but we'll call them the colonists, because they were all British back in those days, weren't they?
That's what we've learned today.
And so we are going to have a great time today. We're enjoying the lovely area, and this is the Minuteman National Historic Park, not to be confused with the Minuteman Missile Site. And as you can see, Boston Harbor, Charleston, Charles River by the way, Cambridge, Minnetonka, Lexington, we've all heard about that in school, and Lincoln. We did go into Concord today too.
We did a beautiful town, lovely, and we had a great lunch. So we will share with you our adventures on this video, and if you want to see more, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, maybe hit like, please, por favor.
Who knows, might want to share the link with a friend.
That'd
You
be
just
nice.
never know.
We'd appreciate that.
Hi, how'd I get here? Yeah, I'm in the studio. Well, okay, a backstory. First off, we're going to have a great show today. If you like American history, you're going to, I think, love this video. It's got maybe about 4 segments. It's not that much of Grace and I walking around this time. This is a different kind of a show, but we're going to take a look at some critique of some of the best videos that I was able to find online. And so under fair use, let's go ahead and talk about what there are. First off, there's a company called Oversimplified, and Oversimplified, here they are. And so we're going to be talking about, from an animation perspective, what led up to the Revolutionary War and what ultimately became the United States of America. So a little bit of background on there. That's going to be fun. It's 4 minutes. It's going to go very fast, so you may want to watch it a second time. Then we have another 1 minute, completely different. This is going to be Assassin's Creed number 3 by GT, let's see, Adventures, I think is what it is, and series guide, that is. And so they're going to have actual animation, somebody playing a game, but it's a reenactment of what led up to be our Revolutionary War. That is going from Boston to Lexington, Lincoln, and then ultimately to Concord. We're going to learn about that later. And in fact, in the third segment is going to be from the National Park Service, a video, which I've combined with some reenactments done by the colonists, the militia, the Minutemen, the rebels, whatever you want to call them, versus the British. Wait, they were all British, right? So the King's Army, the soldiers, the redcoats, if you will. Yeah, they dressed up in omnipotent colors. And then the next part is actually where I go meet with the park ranger, Patrick McGarity. Great guy, and he's a teacher by day, and on the weekend he works at the National Park Service part-time, and he'll go through the 16, I think it is, steps to load a musket, which was actually a French squirrel shooters, what they were. Not quite as powerful as the British, what they had for their muskets, with bayonets on the end for the British, I might add. We'll see some disparities there as we go through this. And then the last part we're going to take a look at is where we go into the National Park Service and we watch the multimedia show, which is really good. So all told, it's about 20-some minutes. So without further ado, let's get in. Oh, and by the way, why this and why now? Well, I had my computer shut down. I had a blue screen of death. It wouldn't boot on my laptop out on the road. Fortunately, all the video from the trip was saved. So you're going to be gifted to be seeing those in the future. Look forward to sharing those. And we are back into screencast days. So I hope you enjoy the show. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and continue on and take it from here. Oh, I'm going to go down in the corner of the screen to get out of the middle part now. So here we go. Okay, back to the show. Are you ready?
7-year-long major global conflict, which
I'll
Great
be,
Britain won. At the
interjecting
peace
things as we go.
negotiations, Spain gave up Florida, while France gave up all of its territories in North America. But Britain's victory came at a cost, a £60 million cost. They were now broke, in a lot of debt, and had to come up with some way to repay it. So they went to the colonies and said, okay, listen up. So a huge part of the war was spent protecting you from the French, and now we have no money because of it. So... I'm not sure what you're saying here. Okay,
What are they
can
saying?
you please pay us back some money? No.
No.
Okay, we're just gonna go ahead and tax. Hey, my dudes.
Whoa, wait a second. Taxation without representation. You may remember that from your school days. And so, yeah, let's go back a little bit about the previous wars. The 7 Years' War, that was between the French and the Indians, and actually the Spanish also, because everybody wanted to get some hands on that land in North America. And so the colonies were prize assets. So the British spent a lot of money to fight off the French and the Indians. And now they say, we really own you now. Well, it's always, they were English people, right? So at this point, taxation, and the colonists are not too swift on that, as we'll find out
This new
why.
tax legislation right here, this is BS. Until now, they had enjoyed relative freedom to rule themselves, and now suddenly Britain was asserting its control. They were especially unhappy because they didn't have any representatives in the parliament that was levying taxes on them. So they protested. Orators gave fiery speeches. British
Give me
goods were
liberty or give me
boycotted,
death.
and anyone loyal to the British found themselves
The Boston
increasingly
Tea
harassed.
Party.
Repeal all the new taxes except for the
Tar
one on
and
tea. Also send
feather.
1,000 troops to Boston to take control. Oh, and make the colonists pay for them. And as December
Oh, so they're going to send in about 3,000 or 4,000 people, the British soldiers, and then they were going to have to pay for them, but we get no representation. Not a good thing.
16th, 1773, a band of patriots known as the Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Native Americans, marched down to Boston Harbor, boarded a British merchant ship loaded with tea, and
I think we're having a little tea party. Would you like a spot of tea?
in front of thousands of spectators, threw nearly 10,000 pounds worth of tea overboard. The British were disgusted, and they punished Massachusetts
Quick, drink
with a
the tea.
vengeance. They dissolved its General Assembly, revoked their charter, and
Whoa, revoke the charter. In other words, all of your local people, the represented officials, no, the British are going to come. They'll go ahead and control all the laws.
sent 3,000 more troops to occupy the city, meaning Boston and Massachusetts were now essentially under the direct rule of Great Britain. They would simply ask the British to stop. Can you stop? No.
No.
It didn't work. Okay, then tell the local militias to start arming and be ready at a minute's notice.
Be ready at a minute's notice. And what do you think that was? Yes.
And across the colonies, these Minutemen stood ready for the beginning of
Minutemen.
the American Revolutionary War. Now, having your colonies in open rebellion is one thing. Once they start arming themselves, that's when it really hits the fan. So British General Thomas Gage ordered 700 troops from Boston out into the rebel-controlled Massachusetts countryside to
Aha. So going from Boston, I mean, we can see there's a great seaport there, a lot of people there. It was flourishing. Grace and I came from up above there, and we eventually worked our way down to Boston. And now we're going about 5-10 miles inland, going east to Lexington, Lincoln. Oh, there was no Abraham Lincoln in those days. This is 100 years before, but city names gets changed. And then going off to Concord, and we'll find out
destroy
why.
stores of arms and ammunition held by the rebels in Concord. The British set out in the middle of the night. Patriots, including Paul Revere, rode ahead to warn that the British were coming.
Whoa! Did you see that? The British were coming? No, the British were not coming. Everybody was British. But that's what Americans commonly think. The British were coming. No, it was something else that was said. It was more like the King's Army is coming.
Giving the rebels time to prepare. The two sides met in Lexington as the sun began to rise. They faced off against each other, and in the confusion, somebody shot first.
Could have been a shot to the sky. Could have been a shot actually were broke out. Actually, what happened is the redcoats, their Pickard, I think it was the leader there, and he met with the colonist, Captain John Parker, and he said, okay, I'll let you pass, but something after that shot was fired, and the next thing you know, it was a free-for-all. Not good.
The shot heard around the world marked the beginning of the American War of Independence. The rebels were outnumbered and had to fall back to Concord.
Okay, so they're going back to Concord, but you heard that Paul Revere, the Midnight Rite, 1F by land, 2F by sea, so they knew we were coming, and now they're going back, and there's going to be a lot more of the colonists, a lot more of the Minutemen. On a minute's notice, they're going to be ready to shoot, and it's going to be open guerrilla warfare. Why guerrilla warfare? Well, John Parker, remember he used to be fighting for the British there when it was the 7 Years' War, and you were fighting against the Spanish, the French, and the Indians, and he learned guerrilla warfare from the Indians. So it was not going to be all Queensberry rules fighting like this. There were going to be other fighting tactics that were going on. So yeah, so it's going to be a little different type of warfare as we find up at
The British
Concord.
split up to search for rebel supplies. However, more and more Patriot rebels kept showing up, and this time it was the British who were outnumbered as more fighting kicked off in Concord. The most professional army in the world was forced to flee back to Boston at the hands of local, poorly trained militiamen.
And here's where John Parker, who, by the way, first off, 10 people were killed on his side. 1 British was wounded. They just massacred him, including they had bayonets. You remember the colonists now, they just got the French kind of squirrel shooters for their muskets, but the French didn't have quite the firepower as the British did, and now the British have bayonets, and John Cousin is skewered by a bayonet, kills him. Another 8 were wounded. So, on the way back, the words got out, and everybody's like a beehive there.
And all along the British route back to Boston, Patriot rebels continued to gather and open fire on the retreating British. When the British reached Boston, the rebel militias surrounded them. Boston and the British were now under siege as small land and naval skirmishes continued around the city.
Okay, that was fun. So now we're going to go off to a little bit of a gameplay, and it's kind of interesting. I'll make some commentary as we go along because there's some things that are fun but not quite exactly true, and I'll point that out. John Parker here. John Parker. By the way, like what happened to a lot of people, he had consumption. What was consuming his body? Making him lose all the weight? TB, tuberculosis. Could be through spit, saliva, coughing, sneezing, and it would eat away at your lungs once it became active. By the way, across the world, would you believe there's about 25% of the people, Africa, China, and other places, that have inactive TB? So we in the free world are quite happy that it's gone away, but it hasn't throughout the world. Now we see the soldiers here, the colonists that is, and they've all got nice, pretty matching uniforms. No, we'll see later on. They were just average, farmers, regular people if they were businessmen. They didn't have uniforms. But for the game, it makes it nice. Different color uniforms, different people.
But if they mean to have a war, let it begin here!
Exactly what it was said in the real world.
Return fire!
So they're going off towards Concord to warn that the British, or in other words, the King's army, are coming, the Redcoats.
Blood's been spilled in Lexington, and there's more to come. The regulars are on the march.
Sir! Mount the barricades! No!
Now,
Ensure
by
my
now,
men
the
hold
Minutemen are
those
ready.
positions.
They've got more than the British 700 folks or so. And that takes us up to the next part. Now we're going to take a look at the National Park Service video, and I'm going to intermix that with some reenactment, which kind of shows how the war was really fought.
Founded on a belief in liberty and inspired by the bravery of the militia on that fateful morning of April 19th, 1775. It is early morning, April 19th, 1775.
By the way, how did Paul Revere know that the British were coming then? I mean, they knew that they were in the harbor and everything, that they were occupying the city. Well, the General Thomas Paine, yeah, he was British, as was his wife, Margaret, and it's believed that his wife was sympathetic towards the colonists and tipped off the Minutemen. Nobody can be sure of that, but that's what modern belief is, how they became informed, how Paul Revere started heading out and notifying
In the
everybody,
chilled spring
one if
air,
by land, two if by
militiamen
sea.
gather
They
on
came
a
by
hill
sea.
overlooking the road into Concord. Farmers, blacksmiths, millers, old men, and young. They are armed and ready to defend their homes and liberty. A cry in the middle of the night has awoken them with the message they dreaded to hear. The King's soldiers are coming.
King's soldiers.
Parliament has taken away our rights, and the king seems not to hear us.
They have had the audacity to shut down Boston Harbor and put many good, honest men out of work.
They want their pound of flesh, right? They want that $80 million, and instead, what do they get? Sunken tea, which and other forms of taxation. And there were other forms of taxation that came before this. I'm not going to get into all those, but that was kind of the coup de grace.
They have filled our courts with corrupt, crown-appointed justices.
7 a.m. The King's soldiers arrive,
There's
about
the
700 strong, marching down Brooks Hill.
The sight is terrifying to us. They make a noble appearance in their red coats, the sun glistening on them.
There's the bayonets that you don't see for the militia, the Minutemen. And by the way, these King's soldiers, they fought in a lot of wars. They fought the Spanish, they fought the French, they fought the Indians, and there's been the Prussian Wars and things going on also.
Shoulder, arm! To the left, face! Trail your arm! To the front, by the right wheel, quick, up! To the left!
Now we'll take a look from the other side of the North Bridge where the colonists are firing back.
Firing broke out, and soon the Redcoats broke and fled.
Not as many as
The
Lexington.
British fell back and began their retreat back to...
But after Concord, it really hit the fan, as it was said, and believe it or not, they were astonished. The Minutemen they're retreating. What? They were fighting for their lives, and now they see they've got them on the run.
Boston. On their way, they suffered many casualties from militia ambushing them along the road.
Now remember John Parker and his people, the militia, they had learned and practiced guerrilla warfare from the Indians, and so, they were going to hit and run. And as we'll see, they lost quite a few troops. Okay, Patrick McGarity, show us your stuff. Looks like a soldier recruit is getting some training here.
I'm Ranger Patrick McGarity. This is Minuteman National Historic Park. We're outside the Hartwell Tavern. I just conducted a 20-minute presentation on muster of the Minutemen. Minutemen were part of the militia, but they were volunteers. They were paid, depending on the town you lived in. 2 to 3 days a week you would train. No matter where you went as a Minuteman, your equipment had to go with you at all times. You had to respond within a minute. So if I'm a farmer and I'm plowing my field, the musket and the equipment would not be, I would not have it in my hand, it wouldn't be on my back, it would be under a nearby tree maybe where I can keep an eye on it. If I hear the pealing of the bells, somebody rides by, saying Minutemen have been called out, I drop what I'm doing, I pick up my equipment, and I respond to the call. There's no time to run back to the house to get this. There's no time to explain to the wife why you're leaving. She knows why, because I am a Minuteman. So when you go to the North Bridge in Concord and you see the statue of the Minuteman, who really is not representing any individual, you see him with the musket in the right hand, and he's leaning forward, and his left hand, it looks as if his hand is removing, it's leaving the handle, the plow of the handle, and that is obviously a symbolic statue. Today it represents our Army National Guard. So if I was out plowing the field and the alarm is raised, I am going to respond immediately to the call. So, Minutemen were your quick reaction force of the militia. Militia are required by law that anybody between the ages of 16 and 60 have to serve in the militia. Exemptions were granted to teachers, doctors, and clergy. Otherwise, you are expected to muster and drill.
Of course, the laws changed there when the King's Army came in and took over control of Boston and Massachusetts. And of course, that's what happened before and ultimately after. A well-armed militia, as we say today.
4 to 6 days a year, again, depending on the community you lived in. So I will now try to demonstrate. There are 16 commands here between company attention to the order given to fire the musket. Now, due to where I'm at the moment, I'm not going to be able to aim the musket due to safety concerns. So the first order given is company attention. The second order given is rest your firelock. Shoulder your firelock. Prime and load. Handle cartridge. Prime. At this point, I would bite off the end, open the pan, pour some into the pan. I would be given the order to close the pan, and then I would be ordered to cast about.
Of course, this is going to work better if it's not a windy day or it's not a rainy day, isn't it? Keep your powder dry, as they say.
At this point, I am then told to charge with cartridge. I pour the remains, including the wadding, and there would be a musket ball in the bottom, down the barrel. I would then be told, draw rammer. Charge rammer. It goes down once, unlike in the movies where you see people, that is not the case. I then pull the rammer out. I put it nearly all the way back, and then I'm ordered return rammer. And then ordered to shoulder firelock. I am then ordered to make ready. And at that point, I turn, the hammer stall comes off. I pull this back, fully extend the hammer. The next order is present. At that point, I would then present, which I'm not going to do here. And the last order is fire.
I think he did a great job, don't you?
Now
he's kind of new at this.
If for some reason
I think he really did well on that.
It did not go off, more than likely the safety officer would say to me that there was a flash in the pan. So when the flint struck the steel, maybe there wasn't enough of a spark, or if there was a spark, it detonated the powder in the pan, but there's a little hole here.
A very small hole.
Right. So when...
Of course, all of this is happening when the enemy is probably firing at you, isn't it? So this is quite exciting times when these types of things happen.
If that was blocked, that would be a reason why the little explosion did not go through the hole to detonate the main charge, which then fires the musket ball. So if that was the case, I would have to dump what was in here. I'm not going to refill in the barrel, but I'm going to take out another cartridge, bite it off, pour some into the pan, close, and then try to refire again. How about that?
Very good. So would you make your own ammunition? I mean, obviously you have to get the powder, but would some of it be manufactured by each soldier?
Yes, but you would also have family. Family would participate, women and children. I've been told from what I've been told, and from what I've read, it can become a family affair, where women and children male, female, did not matter. They would be helping.
How many rounds might you have then? Up to about 10, 20 or so?
This cartridge holds 19.
19, okay.
My understanding is a Minuteman would have 20, 25, 30.
Okay.
The professional soldier who marched out from Boston that day had 36 rounds.
36, okay.
Although I've been told it may be between 32 to 36. From what I've read, they tend to be around 36.
And you'd have about the same complement of, is this your powder in here?
So this is a powder horn,
Yeah.
which obviously was before the cartridge box was established. The problem with this is it takes longer to load.
I see.
So a professional soldier in this time period has to be able to shoot and reload this musket 3 times in the space of 1 minute.
3?
Yes. So an average,
That's
an
blazing.
average of 20 seconds. So the first line may kneel
Right.
and to shoot. The second line would stand behind them, but the third line would take a step out and they would level.
Oh.
And again, I got to be careful
Yeah,
here.
I got it.
There's people around, but I would level my musket over the shoulder of the person in the second line. So you're able to get 3 lines firing simultaneously. He gives the famous command, which had never been given before: my fellow soldiers, for God's sake, fire. And they unleash a volley, and they kill 2 soldiers outright. Third soldier's mortally wounded. 4 of the 8 officers at the bridge are wounded, plus another 5, including a sergeant. And then the unthinkable happens. His Majesty's troops run up on the Monument Straight. Even the militia, Minutemen, are taken by surprise. They will give chase part of the way. They don't chase them all the way back into Concord. But for the next 2 hours, Colonel Smith, he dilly-dallies, he hesitates, and then finally realizes, we got to go back. We can't stay here. So we're going to start walking out here, and I'm going to start talking about the terrain and how things have changed. Okay?
So by the way, they're going for John Adams, or John Hancock and Adams. So yeah, they wanted to take some of the Revolutionary leaders as well as all of their black powder and everything that they were expecting to get at Concord. So they weren't just going out to skirmish with all of the middlemen, but they had a greater cause there.
So, would you like to? Yeah. Follow me. All right. I'm aiming at one dude. I'm not going to hit him. But if there's enough people, I'm going to hit something.
He's so funny.
If I can get it to within effective range, I'm going to put somebody down. And that's what I'm wanting to do. Of course, the soldiers, on the other hand, and Smith realizes this, hey, we got to push these guys back. But the only way you can do that is by sending the light infantry out into the fields to push them back to protect the main column. That means your light infantry now becomes vulnerable, as we will see. There's a quiz on this. Pay attention. The enemy was now completely between 2 fires. In other words, they're in a crossfire. They're going to get hit from both ends of the road. The enemy was now completely between 2 fires. Renewed and briskly kept up, they ordered out a flank guard to the left to dislodge the Americans from their post behind large trees. They only became a better mark to be shot at. So that's what I was saying to you a few minutes ago. Yeah. When the light infantry are sent into the field, they're going up against guys who are behind trees and walls, right? Oh, yeah, they're going to start taking casualties. In Minuteman, it's hand-to-hand combat, room to room, building to building. The blood's up, both sides are angry, no quarter given, no quarter asked. We estimate the regulars lose 40 soldiers in Minuteman. If you weren't an officer, unless you got a really good friend, they're leaving them behind. There are, and this is well documented, you've got some people who, now remember, think about this, they've done an 18-mile forced march. They haven't eaten since the night before. Whatever they got in their canteens, that's it. Unless they were able to convince somebody to make them a breakfast in Concord, which that's well sourced. Here, instead of properly searching your building, I'll give you some money when you cook me breakfast. I knew you were a loyalist. Think about this, there's no antibiotics and there's no anesthesia. It's like bite on this piece of wood and hope for the best, right? There's no throwing up on my tour, by the way.
Okay, so the final part then is the multimedia presentation at the National Historic Park, which goes for about 20 or 30 minutes. And I just have a couple excerpts out of it here, but I think it gives a final flavor in terms of what's up.
Okay, a little different show this time. Once again, National Park Service, and it is the Minuteman Visitor Center, but no, not for nuclear missiles this time. This is what it was named after, was the original Minuteman. Be ready to fight on a moment's notice to protect what would become their independence. And look at that mural, isn't that something? Can you imagine what that would be like? The British coming. Got some men on a flank and they're trying a flanking maneuver, asking for reinforcement, and you can see how they've got a barrier to hide behind, and so exciting times it was. This should be an interesting tour.
A well-known Bostonian, Dr. Joseph Warren, learned of the general's intentions and warned his fellow patriots to be on the alert for signs that the troops were preparing to march.
And this is where Margaret's husband, the general, Thomas Paine, apparently might have told the troops here, including this person, is how the information was released. Very interesting.
On the countryside, Dr. Warren dispatched 2 riders. He sent William Dawes by road across Boston Neck, a risky route guarded by British soldiers, through the village of Roxbury and on to the Bay Road which leads to Concord. The second rider, Paul Revere, would go a different way across the Charles River by boat, then by horse from Charlestown, and there join the Bay Road. Fearing that he might be caught, Revere sent 2 of his fellows to Boston's North Church. There, in the steeple, they flashed the signal that the people of Charlestown had been told to watch for. But Revere's men hung 2 lanterns in the steeple that night, meaning that the British troops would take the shorter and faster route by water across the Charles River and then by foot, 2 if by sea. This provided Revere with a generous advantage of time. He galloped along the highway, calling the alarm as he went.
Wake up! The regulars are coming out! Spread the alarm!
Revere's calls brought to life a great network of alarms, all manner of signals devised by the townsfolk in these parts to alert its inhabitants of British soldiers on the march. The peal of the church bell, the musket firing on the common, or the cry of a night-riding messenger.
Awake! The regulars are coming! The fire of militia! The regulars are coming out!
Throughout the countryside, townsmen and farmers, the men of our colonial militia, heard the alarm, seized their weapons, and set out to help. About midnight, Revere arrived in Lexington and stopped at the house where John Hancock and Samuel Adams were staying. The Redcoats marched through the night. The great majority of casualties occurred, not on Lexington Common, nor at the North Bridge in Concord, but along that bloody battle road. All told, 273 British soldiers were killed or wounded that day. There were 95 casualties among the colonists. Good night. And may God bless us all.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. I know it was rather long, but I thought it was very informative. And if you don't remember your American history as a youngster like myself, it's good to be refreshed and see how history can and may repeat itself and what we can learn from the story of different countries, different ideas, different goals, and the oppression of people, how you might call them revolutionaries, rebels, colonists, Minutemen versus the Loyalists. They were there too, but we won't get into that today. So I hope you enjoyed the show. And as always, we welcome you to come by. And so until next time, happy trails to you and have a great day.
Have you been to California? Seen the sights and people there? Walked the streets of sleepy sea towns, tasted salty ocean.